I want to share with you today how I refinish antique furniture or wood furniture. There's a couple of techniques I learned from a friend of mine who was very, very gifted that way. And one of the first ones is how to glue down veneer. So what you do is you get a needle of some kind. I use printer cartridge needles, or if you have one left over from anything basically. And you can suck up this type of glue into it. It doesn't work as well with this type of carpenter's glue, and I really don't like these type very well. I think they dry kind of sticky and don't hold as well. So I like the wood glue that's like Gorilla Glue. So then you can take a little bit and put it on a knife, or you can put it in, if you don't have a needle, you can put it on a knife, and then you slide it underneath. You slide it underneath the veneer that's lifted up. Now this, you can see the veneer is now flat and down, and there's a little bit of the wood glue still sticky and up, but you put waxed paper, some kind of waxy paper. I put it upside down a minute ago accidentally. That way it keeps it from getting sticky, paper sticking or plastic or anything. And you can clamp it if you have clamps that work, but since this has got kind of a wide, weird thing, a clamp wouldn't work very well. So I just grab a bunch of heavy books and I just stick the heavy books on it, and I've done that for years on the ones in the middle, weird things like this one has splits in the middle. You could do it heavy books on those rather than a clamp. So then I have this divot right here and a couple of little dings that I want to fill in, and it's kind of cracked and separated on some of these things. So you take stainable wood filler, wood putty. There's lots of different brands. You can see I have about 3 or 4 of every different variety of things, down to hand sanders and power sanders and sandpaper and steel wool. I have all different kinds because depending on what you're doing is what you need. So then you take the stain that you are, and I did this years ago. I had a friend that taught me this trick years ago, and I've used it on all of my furniture that I've refinished for 30 years. You take the wood stain and you mix it with the wood filler, and until the wood filler is the color of the table or stain, whatever you're staining. So you have to add just enough stain to make it the color that you need it to fill the hole. So then you would, once you've mixed it, I usually use this, and I'll grab a bit out. It's a paint can opener. So I use it to open the stain. I stir the stain. I wait to stir the stain. I grab some of the putty filler, put it in like a children's medicine cup type of thing, pour a little stain in, and then I use this to stir it. And what you do is you take a spatula and you fill the hole with the putty, any little holes, and then you flatten it with the thing, and it's going to have a little bumpy. It's not going to be perfect. It usually dries a little higher than the hole that you have. And I have a couple dings and some separations that I'm going to fill, and then you let it dry. You have to make sure it's completely dry, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on this table that I did 30 years ago. Somebody gave us this. This was their parents' wedding table, and I keep plastic on it just to keep the varnish nice and pretty. So I just usually cut the plastic to the size of the table, but since this has a curved edge, I have it hanging down a little bit. But I have another video about that you can check out, where I show how I cut the plastic, and everybody thinks it's just a shiny table, but it's actually that thick plastic you can buy on the rolls at Walmart. Anyway, so what you do is you mix that putty, and then you stick it in the area that you need filled. Now this veneer on this table, this oak table, this table is very old. The guy I got it from was about 50 at the time, and his parents got it as a wedding gift. So this is an old oak table, and this veneer had been chiseled up and water damaged. So I filled it with the putty that had stain in it, and this was before they had the stainable putty and everything. So it's a little, over time you can see the colors maybe changed a little bit on it. It's kind of shiny from the light, but this whole area was bad. But you know, if we step back, you can't really notice it, and it's smooth. I've finished it with a nice thick lacquer on top. So also I have this plastic because it's right next to the swamp cooler, and I don't want it to get water damaged. So you can see where that plastic is. unless you're looking closely, you can't tell that there's actually plastic on it because I put it down when it's fresh. Now it's bubbled. But normally if you buy it, yeah, that works this ring. But if you buy it and stick it right down on a clean table, it'll seal itself and stick and be really good. Okay, after the putty has dried, you can use a very fine finish sander, or I just use these block sanders, and you sand in the direction of the grain. And this one is a little tricky because it's got pieced so that it has the pretty grain of the wood kind of evenly throughout the top. But you sand with the grain, and you don't want to sand very much on a veneer, so you're going to use a really fine sandpaper. Now, I never use pretty much anything larger than a 150. This one's 180 fine and grit, and this one is 150 grit. And just so it's for light sanding, because I don't want it to leave a mark. So I have this thicker stuff that I use on my pipings for when I am doing sprinkling systems and things like that. But rarely do I ever use that on wood because it leaves sanding marks. So then you sand the whole thing. Now obviously this isn't finished sanding, but it's stripped, and so the stain and the varnish are off. And what I do for that is I usually will use just a little piece, and there's finishing sanders for this, and there's tools that you can use for this, but I've always just liked to do it by hand, and sometimes the machines will leave like the finishing sanders will leave a swirled grain, and I don't like that. So what you do is you sand it down, get all the veneer off and the varnish and stain off, and not the veneer, I'm sorry. You get all of the varnish and all of the stain off. Don't want the veneer off. And yeah, that would be bad. And then once you've got it all off, I just use a damp paper towel, and I just go along and I dust it. So I've used this and I've dusted it now, and then you can take really, really fine steel wool or a finishing little high fine grit sander and finish sand it down fine. And I'm waiting to do that until I fill those holes and gaps in the wood, and letting my glue dry on that thing. And then once you've got it sanded down, I do a final dusting with just a very damp cotton cloth. I just usually cut up a t-shirt. And once I've done that, then I let it dry completely. You don't want it, it's very, when I say damp, it's almost dry cloth, just to get that fine dust off. And then you can stain it. Now, they have little cards that you can get at the store that you can bring home and match your item to, and every store has their own brand of staining. You just bring home, and Minwax has a ton. So you just bring home the little pamphlet, and they're kind of in end caps on the rack. And so in front of the stains, there's these boards, and it shows what the stain looks like on the different types of wood, and it shows what the stain looks like kind of, in this little pamphlet you can take home. And then you just match the pamphlet to your item. Now this has got dust on it, but it's pretty good. So the one that we found that was the closest was the red mahogany. So then you take a dry t-shirt, cotton cloth, type really fine cloth, and then you rub the stain on. Some people just do the circular or whatever. I usually try to stay with the grain, and you put it on and kind of let it soak in, and then you kind of wipe it off with the dry t-shirt cloth as well to get any other stain off, so it doesn't seep in more in one area than the other if you've got pooling or whatever. So then once you've got the stain color that you want, then you can use a varnish or a lacquer on top of that, and it just depends on what kind you like. Some of them used to go yellow. On my table in my front room, I refinished it, and it bubbled. And I called Minwax, and I thought maybe the varnish and the stain were not working together. But if you can see, I did these two at the same time. There's little bumps. There's little air bubbles. And I called Minwax, and I said, why is it bubbling? And they didn't know. I called 3 or 4 different times, and they didn't know. And so I sanded it down, and I redid it, both of them. And once again, it dried with these little teeny bubbles, air bubbles. And I talked to somebody about it later, and they said, oh, it's because your varnish dried too quickly. I had the fans on and things like that. And so if you don't have it done, don't do it in the high heat or outside in the sun if you can help it. Don't put a fan on it. Just let it air dry, and it will usually not bubble like that. And I think it was the brand and the type that I purchased. So just be aware of that. If it starts to bubble, it's probably drying too quickly, and it could be a chemical reaction. That's what Minwax told me they thought it was a chemical reaction. But like I said, later I figured out that it was through a woodworker friend, that it was drying too quickly. So anyway, that's how I refinish things. And I've done, golly, I can't even tell you, I've done tons of dressers, bookcases, tables, several different tables, probably 4 different tables over the years. And they are all quite pretty. I'll show you though. So this one, like I said, is quite old. And let me show you this one. So I like the darker on the bottom because the black, if it gets chipped like this, the girls' bling pants and stuff, I can just take a Sharpie and fill it in. So where things are going to be hitting, I will do a black normally because it is easier to fix up than if I had a stain on it and it got like this, I'd have to keep redoing it. So this table I did, and then it also has the, so here you can't even tell that it has the plastic, it's just like a shiny varnish, but it does have the plastic on it, and it's just cut right to the edge. And I just take scissors, lay it down, wash it really carefully, put the plastic down, and then I just take the scissors and it'll cut just like this, and I'll just keep the scissors right along the edge. And people come and they're eating dinner, and it, 3/4 through the dinner or something will spill, and I said, oh, don't worry about it, there's plastic on it. And they're like, oh, that's cool. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and check out my blog. I'll put some pictures and some videos on there, some links. And The Secret is Gratitude is my video channel on YouTube, and my blog is thesecretisgratitude.com. Thanks for watching, and have a blessed day.